Hello, Raul.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Hello. James.
We are waiting on Andy Shapiro.
Yeah.
And I hope, there he is.
It is. Hey, Andrew.
Hey, guys.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Raul Peralta. I'm a Senior Vice President with ECS Southeast. I'm also currently serving as your immediate past chair for the next month and a half for the great organization SEDC. We've been very fortunate to have had some terrific panels today, and certainly this panel of experts takes a backseat to no one. We are somewhat limited by time, so I'm going to do a short introduction of each panelist and then ask some questions which will, I think, will trigger some additional thought processes from you, the audience. So in no particular order, my friend Jim Renzas has joined us. He is the Senior Director with BCI Global, having 30 plus years of experience. Part of that experience has included assisting over 300 clients, selecting optimal locations, and participating in over 2,000 incentive negotiation efforts. What I'd like to do at this time, for those of you who know me, is also share a personal note on each one of my friends on this panel. And the personal fun fact on Jim is that in year 2003, he registered as a candidate for governor of California. He went through the process and ultimately lost to Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Terminator, for that position. How about that? My next guest is Ken Malley, Senior Managing Director in Newmark Knight Frank's Chicago office. Ken has a significant background in geography and GIS, which is close and dear to my education. Also, Mr. Maly is an economic developer certified, CCD. His personal fact that I think is fun, he competed as a wrestler in high school and college, only to have his career in participating in the worldwide federal regulation of wrestling, or whatever you call that, cut short by a knee injury. Last but not least, we have Andy Shapiro with Bls Strategies. He serves as leads the advisory practice from the San Francisco Bay area office. It's interesting that Andy has also in his previous life frequented the Fairfax, Virginia area as an economic developer in that area. So he has frequented the East Coast. Fun fact on Andy was that, and I'm going to let him explain this if he can, he was once interrogated by the now Attorney General Bill Barr. He assures us that there was no criminal activity involved in or reason for that interrogation. And he used the word interrogation.
No ongoing investigation, I promise, either.
I got you.
Bill Barr was the general counsel for Verizon at a time when we did the headquarters project for their wireless division. And Bill Barr had a serious interest in having that project occur in Northern Virginia, where he lives. And our report was recommending it go elsewhere. So there was a significant amount of cross-examination of our data and our assumptions and findings around the table that afternoon. It was an uncomfortable experience.
Very good. Well, this panel that we're going to take the next 20 to 25 minutes talking is the bio panel, life sciences panel, whatever word you want to use. And before we get into specific questions, I'd like to get an idea from you gentlemen. When we say bio, can you give me your definition of what that sector includes? And we'll start with Jim. How about that?
Oh, thanks, Raul. Yeah, life sciences, bio projects, encompasses a lot of segments. There's around 800,000 people in the U.S. that work for life sciences companies. There's around 3,000 companies There's never been a down year in life sciences, growth-wise, and some sectors are growing as fast as 9%. But the ones that are growing now are mostly in cell and gene therapy. There's about 20 projects or 20 products per year that's being approved over the next 5 years. So there's going to be a lot of growth there. And then medical devices, we're doing a lot of medical devices type projects. Ag sciences, industrial and environmental applications, and then finally what I call bioeconomy, which is using life sciences to create products like, taking mushrooms and turning them into products, that you can wear. So there's a lot of different permutations to life sciences growing all the time, but it's a fast growing industry.
Thank you. Andy, anything to add to that?
No, I generally agree with Jen. I guess with the way in our own practice, the way we define it, we keep more focused on therapies, human therapeutics. So medicines and medical devices are really mostly medicine. I know there's a large bio piece, and I think Jim just made a moment ago. There's synthetics now coming out of bio and fuels coming out of bio. We focus on the therapeutic side of it. And in particular, the echo was said, tremendous amount of leading stuff out in biomanufacturing in general.
Okay. Ken, anything to add?
Yeah, I just add the disease detection, through blood samples or stool samples, companies like Raul or Exact Sciences, the Cologuard type thing. So that, and then also kind of monitoring through, remote devices that people would wear and monitor their heart rhythm or monitor blood sugars or whatever. So remote detection. That's the only thing I would add. But yes, most of our work also is with gene therapy, cell therapy.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Jim, you mentioned that it's a growing sector. Would you be kind enough to tell us what types of localities or communities are attractive to life science and companies in your experience?
Yeah, it depends on the type of facility. So for like cell and gene therapy projects, if they're at the discovery level, they're looking for areas that have skilled employees, skilled professionals, good pool of workers, usually places where, you'd normally think of a life sciences type of focus. Universities that have, highly specialized doctorate or master's degree programs are important. And if it's a VC funded type of project, it's probably going to be, looking more for cost savings. But, mostly it's going to be on the discovery side, going to be mostly in higher cost areas. When you get into like the therapy side, and manufacturing, there it's areas that have, good GMP manufacturing, training programs, sterilization skills, good material handling, cold chain logistics, and training programs that support that. So it depends on the kind of facility. There's probably a facility for almost every location.
So if when you're speaking of facilities, Jim, are you talking about greenfield sites or available existing buildings? And if it's one or the other, or anything specific that you look for when looking to land or site a life sciences project?
Well, normally they're going so fast, they look only for existing buildings, usually 100,000 to a little over north of 100,000 square feet. If they can find an existing building, that's great. It's got to be in a good town, though, because you can have a good building. Bad town does not a good match. So it's got to be a good town and a good building together. You need the two. So increasingly, we're seeing that greenfield is kind of the way to go for a lot of these companies. So obviously, speed to market is super important to them. They don't want to be stuck in a place where it's going to take a year to get a permit and then another 2 years to get the building built. So speed is important. And utility reliability is super important too, because if you lose power in the middle of one of these processes, it could be devastating in terms of the product that you're producing, in terms of cost wise. So those are some of the things that, from a facility standpoint, that you're looking at.
Very good, thank you, Ken. Let me switch over to you and ask you to give us your ideas on what are some of the important site selection criteria that you've seen.
Yeah, great question. A lot of the projects that we've worked on have like Jim was saying, they come out of the high cost areas. They come out of San Francisco, Boston. We worked on one that came out of Paris. This is where the idea comes from. Then this is the first time that they're trying to commercialize it, but they can't afford to do that there. That they can't afford to do manufacturing there. So they look for a lower cost location. That's where the Southeast comes in great. From those areas I mentioned, I have some reports in front of me. We identified 18% savings in some of the cities of people that are on this call. So the lower cost is key. But I'll also say that a lot of times for some of these therapies, this is their first time trying to commercialize it, and they're not going to move their headquarters. They're going to stay where they are. They really want tight control over these factories, so the accessibility to it is key. So a lot of times they try to stay close to the headquarters, especially for the first one, and just try to find, where can they find the cost savings, but not get too far away, and if they do go across the country, they're going to want direct flights. So, it's cost, and labor is above all else. I mean, I should have started with labor, but you have to have the labor, the clinical technicians, the scientists, the lab techs. So, there's a lot of cities in the southeast that have a lot of concentration of these, top 25 in the country. But they're also looking for cost savings and accessibility. And the last thing I'll say, just to add on what Jim said about real estate, I've found it really tough to find existing buildings, even though we always start that way. Let's find existing building. It's really tough to find a match for these processes because, they need separate HVAC systems. They don't work in multi-tenant. They need their own access secured entrance and exits. And their facility is always unique to any other biotech facility. So we always strike out on that and go back to greenfield in the end a lot of times.
Yeah. And speaking of greenfield sites, the inventory of real estate in specific communities, how important is that? How does that fit into the decision making?
Yeah, great question. A lot of our searches have started with let's find a place that has a lot of facilities. But after searching through all of them and ruling them all out, you end up back to you're going to have to build this. And in that case, the playing field's leveled again. So, a lot of the Southeast does not have the inventory facilities that exist in the Northeast, for example. But don't view that as a big deterrent because really it's hard to find a match unless it's the exact same type of process.
Very good. Thank you. Andy, I haven't forgotten about you. You focused on cell therapy or gene therapy. Tell me specifically, without getting too much details, why is that different than medicinal therapies or the other types of treatments?
No, I'm not a scientist, so I won't get into too much detail anyway, because I can't without getting into trouble. But we're talking about a therapy. So it's cell and gene therapy is a branch of the biologics side of the business, which is what is known as the large molecule versus the small molecule, right? These are medicines made from living organisms, somewhat like vaccines are as well, where you're actually culturing cells and you're purifying cells, and from those you're deriving medicines, as opposed to doing this through a chemical synthesis process. It's very different. It's a different requirement. It's a different kind of medicine. And then within the biomanufacturing area itself, within the biologics division itself, you have gene and cell therapy as a highly specialized entity. Gene and cell therapy really is it's all about injecting cells as a medicine or repairing genes to overcome diseases and other human maladies. And it is distinct from other medicines in one primary way. And this is a point I think we really need to emphasize. Cell and gene therapy leads to a cure. It's not a way of curing. It's not a way of managing a chronic condition. The end result of a gene and cell therapy is to cure you. It's to cure you of Parkinson's disease. It's to cure you of a certain form of cancer. It's to cure you of a certain form of heart disease, which means that eventually the patient population goes away. So to go back to the point that Jim and Ken both made, speed to market is really, really critical in this, right? Because if you're there first with a therapy that addresses an underlying condition that is life-threatening in many cases, and you have a cure, then speed to market gives you an advantage you can't possibly replicate anywhere else. So getting your product to market is really, really key. And to that end, just to some of the points that both Ken and my colleague Jim have mentioned, being able to find a workforce that's accustomed to working in a GMP environment and handling, live cells. And by the way, a GMP environment is not a pleasant place to work. I mean, being in 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours a day in a capped and gown, sterile, aseptic environment is difficult at best. So finding a workforce that specializes in that is very important. And then going back to the issue of real estate, again, speed to market. We don't have time in some of these markets to acquire, entitle, and build out a site. In some cases, we are competing for product with other users, specifically the large open warehouses with 35-foot high ceilings, 150,000 square feet of space. You're obviously competing with e-commerce and e-retailers on that right now, which is making it very tough. But the desired state is still to find an existing facility if at all possible, again, for speed to market.
Yes, sir. Good. I'm going to go back to, you talked about qualified workforce. What are some of the other factors that you've seen make a local community or a community successful in pursuing and actually landing a life sciences project or a gene therapy project?
You're directing this to me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. All right. So a qualified workforce is important. I'll echo again what Ken and Jim have said, which is cost is not always the key factor here. Access to talent and access to real estate are important. I just want to also bring up the point that Ken had made and emphasize this. Being proximate to the center where the drug is being developed and discovered and developed, being close to the location where the engineering team is designing the processes is also very, very important, which again trumps, in many cases, trumps the cost issue. It's the emphasis back on speed to market, on being able to engineer processes quickly and get them in place. From a workforce perspective, yes, you really want to be in an area where there is a history of GMP manufacturing. In the ideal world, that's a very short list of markets where current cell therapy or biologics manufacturing occurs. It also could be a market perhaps where you have other aseptic kinds of manufacturing, nutraceuticals, certain kinds of pharmaceuticals, even cosmetics, although those require significantly additional training to be fungible into a biomanufacturing workforce. And the last piece is, I think Jim brought this up, is you really want a pipeline. You really want to be in an area where the community college system, even the high schools to some extent, have a pathway to careers in biomanufacturing, in bioprocessing, biotechnicians, analytical chemistry, and so on.
Good. I want to direct this question to all of you, and I'll start with Jim. Two-parted question. One, do you feel comfortable noting what locations within the U.S. are emerging as hubs for this type of project? And two, if you could summarize what a community should be doing today to be on that short list of an emerging hub for life sciences projects, that would be great. And Jim, if we could start with you. So again, what are the hubs that are being successful? And two, what can a community do to be on that list?
So there's like two levels of areas. The first is the first tier, which is like the Bostons and the Research Triangle. And
Jim, we can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. Is it on now?
Yes, sir.
So there's three things. There's three levels. There's the Bostons and the RTP and San Diego, and that's the first level. Those are the ones that want to stay close to discovery. Then, as they go out, there's emerging areas, like upcoming areas, like the Philadelphia, New Jersey corridor, Seattle, Southern California is becoming very popular, and then Seattle. And then in emerging areas, you're seeing places like Atlanta, Tampa, Columbus, Ohio, Memphis, Austin, Houston, Jacksonville, and Dallas becoming areas that have more and more interest. And the second part of your question is what can communities do to encourage the development of these types of facilities? And the most important thing is developing the labor force. And, if you're a labor force that is trained in sterilization technology, GMP, clinical trials, those kinds of things, they're looking for a labor force that has those skills. So, it's super important when it response to this. And obviously, if you have a labor force, then you need to have the buildings to build it. So you really need both things. I don't think incentives are all that important. Obviously, they may make the decision between the two finalist areas, but it all starts with the workers. And even though COVID has kind of knocked back employment for a while, I think we're probably going to start coming back in 2021 on that, and we're probably going to be back in the same space we were before COVID, which is a labor shortage wherever we go. And that's what gives guys like us gray hair and try to find those locations.
Very good. Thank you, Jim. Ken, do you want to add anything to that? Your perspective?
Yeah, well, I mean, like Jim said, it all starts with the labor. And if I think of, your audience here, your service territory, just mentioning a few more that I didn't hear mentioned, these are probably more on the emerging side. Miami, Tampa, Atlanta, Orlando, Austin, Richmond, Durham. These are Nashville. These are all ones that, in previous studies that I have in front of me that just had high concentrations of the kind of labor for clinical lab technicians, medical and diagnostic laboratories, clinical lab scientists. These are the cities in your area that popped up: St. Louis, Houston, so even San Antonio. So yeah, those are areas that we're looking for that have the labor that if they can provide the other aspects we're looking for, those kind of make the list.
Good. Andy, you want to add anything to that?
I'm trying to remember the list now. It's grown quite long. But I think a couple of additions I'd make to that is I'd add New York City because New York is starting to come on strong now, especially on the east side of New York where there's a cluster developing. I'd also not want to forget the Philly market. I'm not sure if that came up before, but the Philadelphia market has been a traditional center for traditional medicines, and it is now an emerging area in biologics and cell therapy as well. That whole corridor right down through Washington, D.C. and the Maryland suburbs, spurred a lot by NIH and the presence of the FDA. There's a fair amount of on the discovery side happening there, more so than manufacturing, but it is starting to move out, especially in Frederick County, out into manufacturing also. And then I wouldn't want to forget about another couple of places, Indianapolis, which has had a long history around Eli Lilly, and also a fairly significant cluster around in the viral vector industry. Viral vector is a way of introducing the drug into the human body, and that has grown up in the Indy area, and it's become pretty significant. I wouldn't forget that. And then finally, Denver as another emerging hub as well. But I would add these to all the other places that both Ken and Jim had shared with you.
Very good. We're coming to the end of our panel, unfortunately, discussion. Some of the takeaways for those of you who are not on that exclusive list that was mentioned, speed to market was something that was mentioned. Greenfield sites as opposed to existing. Workforce, specific skills, and I believe it was Jim that talked about starting in the high school, community colleges, and certainly four-year universities. I don't know if I've left anything out that you three gentlemen would like to add to that.
I think it's good.
Okay. I thank you all three for taking the time to join us and sharing your expertise with us. It's been wonderful. SCDC appreciates all that you do for us and the opportunities to hear your viewpoints.
And I would just want to add that as consultants, we appreciate and rely heavily on the economic development community and a partnership. We would not be successful without SCDC and its membership. We don't for a moment forget that fact. And so thank you.
Thank you, Andy, for saying
Great
that.
point, Andy. Yep.
That is all.